Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansbury.
And Amy Cornell.
And we are talking about author doing book signings in indie bookstores or Barnes & Noble. And what's really interesting is we talk about how sometimes we have to repeat these shows and, a lot of times we're sort of scrambling for fresh new ideas. We have never done a show on just straight bookstore signings. Isn't that bizarre?
I know. I swear. Sometimes I feel like, it always shocks me when we're like, really? We haven't covered this yet?
I know. Well, we've skirted around it. We've talked about book events in non-bookstore venues, right? We did that. But we've really never done a show on how to get, this show is not just about how to get a signing, how to score more in-person events at bookstores, but also how to make the most out of every single event. So we'll talk about why these events are still powerful: visibility, reader connection, how to create an irresistible pitch, and what to do besides just sitting at a table with a stack of books. I wrote an article one time years ago called "Book Signings Are Boring," and it was meant to be a little bit of a eye-catcher title, because sitting at a table with a full pen, a stack of books, and maybe a little flower doesn't make you an interesting doesn't make for an interesting for an interesting event. And
exactly.
So and just a reminder, and it's possible that by the time this show hits that the book will already be up for pre-order on Amazon, but the workbook for the Amazon Author Formula is done and it's coming out soon. So I'm really excited. I'm always excited when I've birthed a new book. So I love that. Amy, do you want to take the first one? Do you want to take the first point?
Sure. So the first one, why in-person events still matter.
Yes.
I hope nobody's listening and thinking that, but you never know. Maybe, we do talk about how it's typically a smaller venue. We did a show recently on, bookstore scams too, where we got really real about numbers and things like that and expectations. But honestly, getting out there and getting involved is what's really important. So local visibility. And, the thing about events too is that they're only as good as you're going to make them. And we'll probably touch on that a lot throughout the show. But it's not just about securing the event. It's about all the things you can do to build off of that and to capitalize on that one opportunity.
Yeah.
So once you book the event, start planning the event, that's when you start going after media. That's when you start networking with other local businesses. Like there's really, it's a snowball effect of positive things that can happen. And, we talk about it all the time too, the power of the recommendation,
Yes.
So getting in front of locals, getting in front of regional reader base is something that's something memorable too, I will say. Like anybody listening, if you've met an author throughout your life, a local author or something like that, like that's something you remember. That direct connection matters so much more and leaves an impression on a reader so much more than them finding your book online, which is, I hate to say, the traditional way now,
Right.
But so you've almost made a lifelong fan. If you've created a good product, if you've written a great book, and you start meeting people in person and introducing them to that book in person, the chances of that person being a return buyer and also referring your book, recommending you, mentioning that they went to your event to a friend, skyrockets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really that personal connection. And you'd be shocked at how, we've worked with a number of clients that it's crazy how once they started booking some local events, how many amazing opportunities were presented.
Right, exactly. And I think that it's also, we spend so much time focusing on Amazon, but there is something very powerful about that author-reader connection that you get from doing an event in indie stores or in chains like Barnes & Noble. So let's talk a little bit about planning, and then we're going to go into some, unique events, and I have strong feelings about all of those things just because I've done a lot of book events, and we've worked with a lot of authors who we've planned book events for. Um, you're not going to get a book event if you listen to this and you think, oh my gosh, I want to do this. You're not going to get a book event next week. So you do want to definitely plan ahead for it. And I recommend take a look at, so the majority of bookstores, whether they're indie or chain, have some kind of a calendar. And Barnes and Noble used to print them off, and you would get them at the register, and they use them as bag stuffers for upcoming events. And I'm not sure. I have gone to Barnes and Noble very recently, but I'm not sure that they still have. I didn't actually look for them. Shame on me. But they always have a calendar online, so take a look and see what's coming up, right?
Mhm.
Because when you look at that calendar, you'll see how far out that the bookstore plans events. And then, the other thing is that you'll be able to see from the calendar whether there was an event that you could potentially dovetail in. And we're going to talk about doing multi-author events in a minute, but that's something that you may want to, you may have their bookstores may do, like romance author night or mystery author night or science fiction author night or whatever. And that's potentially something that you could anchor onto and do an event. And I love doing those. And we'll talk in a minute just about why, but I would definitely plan, 90 days at a minimum. Bookstores will typically book any of the big celebrity authors that are touring. They book those folks out sometimes 8 months, depending on how early the publisher goes after them. And there's always space for you to do events. Not every single book event has to be done like on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Those are high times for a lot of these celebrity authors. So those times may be rough to get, but consider doing something, and on a weekday. I realize it may feel a little bit less optimal, but it is a great way to get your feet wet. I actually started my speaking career doing bookstore events. And depending on where you want to go, if you want to, if you want to do some events when you're somewhere on vacation, like you think, oh my gosh, there's a lot of indie bookstores, I could do these here. You can plan those far in advance, but you may end up just really falling in love with doing author bookstore events. And then the next thing you know, you're doing them all over the, potentially all over the country or wherever you travel to. Libraries, we did a library show, so we're not really talking necessarily about libraries specifically on this, but there are also a great place for you to do a book event. The only difference between a library and a bookstore is that depending on the library, you typically won't be selling books, right? So they usually can't take money. They don't have that kind of, and you may be able to talk to your library about like, oh, they can just pay me on Venmo or whatever, and you can sell books there and fine, but it's really specifically to the library. The idea with doing an event at a bookstore is so that not only do you get the event, but potentially they might keep a few copies for readers who heard about the event, and you never know, it could be your way into a bookstore.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just excited for the next one. This is where the fun part
Well,
comes.
why don't you lead it off then?
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, so get creative when it comes to event ideas.
Yes.
Please don't pitch businesses or venues expecting to sit there and everybody's just going to fawn over you because you wrote a book.
Yes.
That is so boring.
Yes.
That is not intriguing. It's not something interesting for the business or venue to promote. You got to make it fun. You got to make it interesting. Make it on theme with who your readers are. Your book also. You could do something very different for like a rom-com than you would a thriller even. You know what I mean? So you have to get creative. Think about who's reading your book. Think about what those people like. Think about who the venue's clientele is and get really thoughtful about what you pitch in terms of what you're going to do at the event.
Yeah.
I love this. Talks with a twist. So behind the scenes of your book, you can plan to talk about the writer experience. You know what I mean? I think if you have like a coffee shop venue, I think for sure that would be really interesting You know, there's
Hmm.
probably a lot of people that if you have a great local coffee shop scene, there's probably a ton of those people that have considered writing a book, or maybe they're already writing it and floundering. So they might be super interested in you getting really candid about the writing process. Um, but again, that's about thinking about the venue, who their clientele is. Does your reader market overlap with that? What would be interesting to those people, and what could this venue get excited about promoting? And Penny, I think that also ties back into what you said about planning, about pitching certain days. Weekends, a lot of places already get enough foot traffic.
Yeah.
So a great way to also kind of angle this in the venue or business's favor is pick a day or an evening that's not as busy for them, because having a fun event, something different for them, something new that they can promote to their clientele to get them in on a day that's normally not busy also helps them as a business. There's a lot of pubs and places like that that started doing quiz night for that reason. And they do it on a Tuesday because most people, I mean, no judgment, but a lot of people aren't heading out to the bars on Tuesdays. But hey, all of a sudden they do pub quiz and Tuesdays are packed. It's
Right.
brilliant.
Right. Exactly.
So get creative and be very thoughtful about marrying all the different elements of the potential based on who you're working with, who you're pitching, and make sure you're focusing on that, because the more interesting you make the pitch, the more likely you are to get a yes. And the more you pay attention to the needs of the business or venue, the more likely you are to get a yes as well.
Right. Right. Exactly. And we had an author, um, and I don't know if this was, I'm trying to think of when this was, but and she would do these events in costume. So she had a historical fiction book, and she would actually show up and do these book events in costume. So she made it very unique. I mean, I think to Amy's point, and you make a very good point, is that bringing in new foot traffic on nights like on a Tuesday when then they evenings when they aren't normally that busy, but then also bring them something that's really going to pique the interest of the bookstore customers, that they're going to want. I want to show up on a Tuesday at 6 o'clock to see this, or whatever, to see this this event, if it's like a themed reading.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked with an author one time who did event. She loved doing bookstore events. And one of the things that she would do is she would partner with, and she had I want to say that this was so long ago now. Um, this was a cozy mystery. And she partnered with a local bakery to make these little tiny mini cupcakes, right? And the business cards for the local bakery were sitting on the table. And so what happened is she had this event. She had this great like snacky things for this fun little cozy mystery adventure book.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also it also promoted the bakery too. So there's a lot of things that you can do even with other local businesses, local independent businesses, to bring them into this. Because then what also happened, consider this, is that maybe you can put up some signage in the local bakery that they're going to be catering, quote unquote catering, um your book event or something like that. Do you know what I mean? So you can
Yes.
create, but make it really fun. And Amy mentioned talking about writing, but I mean, you could do um writing mini workshops, like book themed games. I mean, Q&A. I mean, yes, you can sit down. I mean, if this all sounds really overwhelming, yes, you can sit down and you can have a regular discussion about your book. But that's really more of a book club kind of setting where they've all read the book and now they're coming together to discuss the book.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to I mean, yes, you can read a chapter from your book, but sometimes authors feel uncomfortable doing that, or they're not good book narrators, which not everybody is. So
Right.
really lean into your strengths, because if you're not good in front of a crowd, creating something that is more social, more conversation, fun, coming up with games, things like that author that I mentioned that showed up in
Mm-hmm.
costume, and actually created like this, like her husband made this arch for her and then she would take pictures with the, with the readers. I mean, it was really just, it was so lovely. And it creates something that's memorable that the reader, would just won't forget you. And a picture that they can share on social, about an author event that they went to. I mean, it's really, it's you can make these really, really fun.
Yeah, I agree. Because to me, just standing in front of a bunch of people staring at me, waiting for me to be
Oh
interesting
my
is
gosh.
terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
So, I think something hands on, something interesting, something to keep people busy and engaged.
Mhm.
And you know what I mean? That tactile involvement with you kind of making your way and introducing yourself and getting involved. And I think definitely lean into anything that's unique about your book.
Yep.
If there's something that is unique about your storyline or unique to your storyline, whether that's food, everybody loves food and snacks.
For
So
sure.
food,
Yes.
snacks, drinks, everybody likes a little glass of wine, especially if you're doing an evening event.
Yep.
Like you'd be surprised at how many people are going to stop by our event on a Tuesday because like, oh, snacks and wine and an author and they're going to do something fun. Like absolutely, I'll be home a little bit later than usual. You know what I mean?
Right.
So lean into that, lean into things that are unique to your book because it's such a obvious segue. Like, so you're doing something interesting, the event has a theme, and then of course it relates to your book, and you get to explain that to the people that are there. And that gives you a very natural way to talk about your book where you don't feel like you're giving a presentation,
Yeah.
And obviously, I think for nonfiction, if there are nonfiction authors listening, teach them something useful. Don't make it boring. Don't make it homework. Make it something super useful where people go, oh my gosh, yes, I need to know how to do that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Keep it fun, keep it punchy, keep it fun. Say you will walk away knowing how to do this after this event. Like that's very cool. Like
Yeah.
give them something to bite into, literally and
Yes.
figuratively. And then
Yes.
for children's authors, I mean, we could do a whole show on that. So I feel like I would ramble on forever all the fun things you can do if you write for kids or, children. But again, keep it tactile, engagement, hands-on, a craft. Again, lean into what makes your book unique and fun and interesting and try to do something that mimics that. And honestly, it could be also as simple as making sure you print out coloring sheets of that match your book's themes and illustrations and things like that, but give them something memorable.
Yeah, exactly. And I met an author one time at a conference and she had a cookbook. Now, doing an event in a bookstore around a cookbook seems challenging, right? Like she'd be better going to like Williams Sonoma or something when they have some sort of class night to take her cookbook and do some cooking. But what she did was she took one of the most popular recipes in the cookbook, and it just coincidentally it happened to be appetizers. She made these in advance. She brought them to the bookstore, and then she handed out these little recipe cards, right, with her book branding. So it was all branded to her book. Um, in the event that they didn't pick up the book that night, although obviously that is the goal. And the idea was that look, you could try this. This is what I made, and it has basically like three ingredients, and you will impress the heck out of your family or a party or whatever. And so she made it work, right? With being in a bookstore and not having a kitchen, like she brought in the appetizers and people just loved it. And they, and the majority of them, I remember her telling me, she said, I think it was like one person that didn't buy the book. They all got the recipe card, like, here you go, is a little takeaway for the night. And it feels both welcoming and generous, but they all walked out of there with a copy of the book, except I think for one person. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
really, I mean, taking these up to the next level instead of just sitting there. And the other thing though too is that the more fun that you have with these, not only will your guests be more memorable for your guests, but the bookstores recognize that too, and the bookstores talk to one another like, oh my gosh, this author was so great. And that's actually one way. I talked to an author one time at another author at a conference, and that's actually how she ended up getting booked on events not only in her area, but then across the country. So she and her family decided, well, we're just going to, write off part of the trip and do these events and, in all these areas because she was just so good at doing these events and she was so good on her feet. Now, if all of this seems super intimidating to you, the buddy system. And this is so interesting because Barnes and Noble, I remember talking to a manager at Barnes and Noble locally to me. And I want to say they started doing these maybe 13 years ago. And they did them, it may even be longer, but they did them because with all the influx of independently published authors coming in and coming to their door, they were like, we want to help these people get an event, but we really cannot put all 50 of these authors who have dropped
Right.
off a copy of their book, really can't put them on the calendar. So what they did is they had they had specific genre nights, right? So they had the sci-fi authors, and then what ends up happening is that yes, you're sitting with a bunch of authors, like it's a great opportunity to network with other authors in your area, absolutely. But if all of you, like, let's say it's 10, in some cases they were 10 authors, right, that they would do these events, and they were obviously bigger stores and big events drew lots of people because if each author does their own promotion, even if they're just going after their own people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're pulling in a much bigger crowd and you have the potential to sell lots more books. And if the bookstore has not done this recently or at all, suggest it to them. And if you're connected locally to author groups and things like that, you could even suggest it. And you could do just independent authors night, right? Where you're bringing in a cross section of genre, but you'll get more sell through if you're staying genre specific. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I agree. If you can focus on, your promotion and your theme and everything on one, there's obviously we've spent quite a lot of time talking about how important that is and how fun it can be. So, yeah, I agree. But that is so brilliant. I love it. It makes me think of like author speed dating. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like how fun would that be? Like, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. I get so excited every time I see a local author.
Yeah, I know. It really is. It's fun. Now, the tricky part, obviously, about these events is pitching them. And Amy, do you want to
Yeah.
start us off on that?
Yes. So we kind of, we already talked about you have to have a plan. You need to
Yeah.
have something, be interesting, be engaging. It's better if you can feed them. Check, check,
Yes.
check. But then it comes to the actual pitch. So obviously that's really important. And this does involve some technical aspects, which everybody listening, you're perfectly capable of, but it definitely shows your level of professionalism, so you want to have a sell sheet for your book. And we don't need to go into all of that because you can look it up or, obviously we do a lot of these for our clients, but it includes your basics like your bio, your book blurb, any major reviews or endorsements that you've had, past events. I mean, it's basically kind of like your book's resume to date. You just really want to put it down on something that they can look at because you really have to think about all the options here. You may not get somebody on the phone that you get to pitch and chat with for 10 minutes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So be prepared to cover everything you want to say and convey to them via email. If you get to chat with them on the phone, awesome. That may be something that you do after you pitch them via email. You know what I mean? So you just want to make sure you have everything together, really concise, really tight, really impressive in multiple formats. We talked about what are you promising in terms of not only the event, how it will go, how what you plan on doing, how you would like to host it. If you're planning on coordinating with any other local businesses, like Penny mentioned, whether it's to provide snacks or something else that makes sense for your theme. But then you also want to be prepared to brag about your mailing list. Do you have an email list? Do you have a newsletter that you can already tap into? What can you do on social media to help promote this? Any local connections you have, are you a member of Rotary or something like that where you can, tap into your local network? And then also what you're willing to do.
Yeah.
We do for clients all the time. They pitch an event and they will ask us to help support them by pitching local media,
Yep.
to help give them a leg up in terms of that. So be willing to put in the work too. I would say, do not expect the business to spend money on you.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Yes.
So go into this and not that, so if you don't want to hire somebody to help pitch media or to help get the word out or to help, manage your social, just be willing to put in the work, be willing to connect with local media, local influencers, things like that to help get the word out and to help, and be able to tell the venue that I am going to follow through with doing X, Y, and Z, and this is the reach that I have and that I'm going to aim for. So they know that you're putting in the work too.
Right, exactly. Because the bookstore is literally the bookstore is offering you a space where you can have this event and you can bring in people, but they are not going to do the work to promote the event. And I'm not saying this because I'm not saying like, oh, bookstores are lazy at all. They just don't have the time. They will put
Right.
it in their newsletter, whether it's still printed out or online, whatever. But the rest is really up to you. You have to really drive those events. And then one thing I want to mention, and it's funny because I didn't include it on the notes here. If you're planning to saturate your local area in bookstore events, be very careful with that because bookstores know that authors typically, when they're doing events, especially if you're just starting out, you're pulling from your local base, right? So you're pulling from friends that you know, family that you have locally, whatever. And they also know that there's an expiration date on that. So if you book, if you're listening to this, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to book back-to-back events and all these, you're going to get the first one, but you're probably not going to get the second and third if they follow closely on the heels of the first one. Because bookstores
Right.
know that you've tapped out of that market, and then every single time that you do an event, your crowd dwindles by 50% or more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's great to do local events, fabulous, but you definitely want to space them out. And that's why I think if you have neighboring towns where
Mm-hmm.
you could pull in a fresh audience, I think that's always a great idea. But just make sure that they know that they are, they're going to ask you, like, how many events have you done? Because they want to know if you've tapped out of your audience, because otherwise you're going to be sitting there, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, with a stack of pens and a full pen, and it's not going to be very fun.
Right. And that's a very good point, Penny. And another reason to get creative in terms of where you can do these and who might be a good venue and what
Yeah.
businesses might be good to partner with on
Yeah.
this, because, you know, different businesses obviously have different clientele that are interested in different things. So if you can customize, what you would like to do at that event for that store, particularly based on who their customers are, then you're giving yourself more options. To Penny's point, you're not just a one trick pony doing the same thing over and over again in front of the same crowd.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a very good point.
Exactly. And I really like, whenever you can, I like going into a bookstore. In fact, even if you have no inclination to do book signings, go into your local bookstores, multiple stores, and get to know the managers, get to know the book buyers, get to know the staff. They are the front line of book sales, and they can really be an asset to any author, both in events if you should decide to do those. Or I actually have had authors that will walk into a bookstore and talk to the staff there if they're trying to decide between two or three different covers, and they will give you some really honest feedback because they know what sells and what doesn't. And a lot of publishers actually do that too. So bookstores are really good. Make friends with your local store when you're pitching them. If possible, walk in, drop off your packet. And by your packet, I mean the sell sheet that Amy talked about. And I think we actually did a show on media kits before. And this is another one where now I'm going to go back through our list and be like, oh my God, we haven't done a show on media kits, but I'm pretty sure that we have. Include that, print it off with a copy of your book, and drop that off and just shake the hands of the manager
Mm-hmm.
and let them know. Now, there used to be Barnes and Noble used to have a specific events manager for book events, and that's basically, I think, almost all that person did. And that has pretty much gone away. Some of the bigger stores may still have that. So if you're in big metro, like I know that the bookstore on Fifth in New York still has their events manager because they do so many events there. But face to face, obviously, is is the best way to go. By phone is fine too, but I love in person pitching whenever you can. All right, so let's go into prepping for success. Now, I have Okay, do you mind if I lead this off? Because I have really
No, go for it.
about this. Okay, so listen, I've done book events. So I wrote a book. It was a romance novel. Please don't anybody ever read it. I wrote it 24 years ago. It was not, my gosh, or 25 years ago now. I was not that good of a writer. I'm actually afraid to like read it again because I'm like, oh, I bet this is just so bad. But anyway, I was doing an event up in Oregon, and I was touring Oregon because that's where the book is set. And I had shipped them bookmarks, mini posters, all kinds of, bag stuffer things, which I'll talk a little bit more in a second. And as it would happen, they were having like apocalyptic rain that day, right? And there was a piece in the newspaper, on this, several different newspapers in that area were doing like this, the author of The Cliffhanger comes to Oregon. Oh my God, I said the title. Please don't look it up on Amazon. It's probably really awful. I am like the anti-book promoter for my own stuff. But it was like torrential rain that they hadn't seen in, I don't know, 1,000 years. It was one of those days. And I was like, oh my God, what do I get? So I did all this stuff. And then I found out that the bookstore thought that the swag that I sent ahead of time was for the day of event. So they didn't put any signs in the windows. Right.
Oh God.
I was horrified. So I went up there and, I walk in and she's like, okay, well, here's the box that you mailed us all your stuff. I'm like, oh my God, these were bag stuffers for the bags. Anyway, whatever. So there were still people coming to the bookstore to buy books, even on this rainy day. But I literally there was nobody there for my book signing. Right. So I actually went through, so I took those bookmarks because I'm like, okay, well, you're not using them. So I took those bookmarks and all the little fun swag things that I had, and I walked around and I talked to people who were shopping in the bookstore. And I ended up selling, I think I brought 25 books with me. I sold out of those books that day. So, um, prepping for success, really important. Sometimes you prep and you still have to be ready to be doing some stuff, if you end up getting torrential, right? And Amy lives in an area where they always have this, like, I get alerts on my phone for her weather. I don't know why. I'll have to figure it out someday. But sometimes, like, I'll text her on the weekend and be like, wow, you're having a really exciting, an exciting weekend with this weather. That was the kind, like, it was just this crazy. So, all that to say, if you're doing an event out of town, mail all this stuff to the bookstores. Make sure that they know to use it ahead of time. Or if you are saving it for the event, fine, but let them know that. I love to do bookmarks. I know this sounds to an author when you tell them to print up bookmarks. They're like, well, doesn't everybody read an ebook and blah, 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 whatever. Everybody loves bookmarks. It's weird how much readers really love bookmarks, right? Especially if they're going into a bookstore because they're buying a book. They're not buying something digital, so they're going to need a bookmark. I actually, if you can, I mean, you can like Vistaprint and Gotprint, whatever. You can do this really cheaply. Get bookmarks printed with the event date on them, right? I had another author who she was going to be doing a lot of events, so instead of printing the event date on the bookmarks, she actually had like a little space for a sticker for one of those clear Avery labels that she had printed and it looked really nice. And then she just printed the date and time and event, and then she could use the bookmarks for a variety of different events. So that's also an option, right?
I love that.
Yeah. Create an event poster. Do not expect the bookstore to make an event poster for you. It's something that they could put in the window, right? And make sure that they know that the bookmarks are for bag stuffers. They love, people love these bag stuffers. But yeah, and flyers at the bookstore will let you put down flyers, but definitely something for the window is a great idea. So I really like that. Amy, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about food. Everybody loves a snack. Have people engaged other than just having to do a presentation,
Right.
So along with that, I mean, that could be candy, chocolate, there's themed based on, depending on what your book, your genre, and we've said it multiple times during the show, tap into what's unique about your story or your content and consider having swag for that. You can do a raffle or a giveaway. It's a great way to collect, emails,
Yes.
for your newsletter.
Yeah.
And nowadays, take advantage of putting QR codes on stuff,
Yeah.
like decide where they need to go. If you have a website, that's even better because then they've got full access to all the things. But, use a QR code. Everybody's used to using them now and they expect great things. So tap into that. And you just, again, like Penny said, you want to give them something to take with them because, again, you may not, the number of books you'll sell at the event is anybody's guess, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean there's not a ton of potential to sell more books after the fact. Or, somebody may buy a book and then the swag that they get to take with them is something that they hand off to a friend because they go, oh, I got this book, here, I got this at the event. Check them out.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And then we talked about promoting, obviously, but have your act together as soon as you have details about date, time, location, what's going on. Make sure you get that info out to your local media, to local influencers, community groups, and be shameless. Ask your friends to spread the word too,
Yeah.
Send out an email, let people know, ask friends to bring friends. You know what I mean? This is when you can't be shy. You know what I mean? You're already going to do an event. People are going to show up. Like you might as well also don't be shy when it comes to promoting it.
Yeah. Exactly. And I want to emphasize something, your newsletter. So I really encourage you, if you don't have a newsletter and you're going to do an event, definitely um, get a newsletter sign up. I mean, yes, you can definitely do the QR codes. I had an author one time that I talked to, and I want to say I talked to this author at a writers conference too, but and he said he gets like 50 people at all of his book events. And I said to him, I said, I'm like, well, that's great. You must really be building your newsletter. And he just kind of gave me a blank stare. And I'm
Mm.
like, dude, you're not having people sign up for your newsletter. I mean, it's crazy. So what I recommended to him, kind of like what you led with, Amy, is sign up for the newsletter, and have a raffle, right? And then you draw the names when you don't have to draw them that day. You draw the names when you get home. Um, and and then you build your newsletter list and you get a raffle, they get a prize, things like that. But um, definitely want to emphasize the newsletter because it's a great way to you build your local fan base for sure.
Mm.
And I love the themed swag idea that you mentioned. I think that is I had an author who did, I actually talked to her, we worked with her, and she did shot glasses, and I'm like, that must be just so expensive. And I guess she found a place where they did them like really cheaply
Yeah.
because it tied into her book, like her protagonist, loved this particular shot glass or whatever. Anyway, so your event swag can be trading cards with your I have so I got this idea actually from a romance writers conference. I do trading cards with marketing tips on them, but the trading card originated and in the romance writers world where they did character trading cards. And so each character is printed on a little card and they're just baseball size cards. In fact, I get them at Got Print, and I think they're either called baseball trading cards or just trading cards. But they're really inexpensive to do. In fact, now I have like, oh my gosh, I have like 2,000 of these cards, and it's a penny to print, to go like, well, you sure you just want 100 because it's a penny to go up to 10,000, and then next thing you know you
Right.
have to add on to your house because you don't have any room to put these trading cards. But as a great idea. So the event day, listen, we've done a lot of events for our authors, and I've done a lot of events individually. Get there early. And
Mm.
so let me back up a little bit. Yes, you want to get there early, but here's a tip, and I learned this ages ago, back when I was still faxing. I know this again,
Mhm.
listeners are gonna be like, oh my gosh, she sounds 900 years old. Um, I was faxing event info for book events for our authors to newsrooms, and I was at an event. It was a media event where they all get together for lunch and producers and whatever. And I was really surprised to talk to some of them and go, you would not believe how many guests bail the day of their media interview.
It's wild.
So it's mind numbing, right? So the media is always looking for last minute, because I'll tell you something, if you are running a newscast for the evening news, 30 seconds is a big gap to fill,
Mm-hmm.
right? So always email the features desk the day of your event as well. Like I used to sit over a fax machine and just fax the stuff the day of when we had author events. If they hadn't gotten coverage from one particular media outlet, I'm like, just going to see if, and a lot of times they would contact me like, oh my gosh, we have a 45-second spot to fill and we're going to feature this author. And 45 seconds, it doesn't probably sound like a lot. You'd prefer 20 minutes. Like I get it, but take it.
Yeah.
So prior to the event day, before you leave, send out another email to your newsrooms. And sometimes it's the feature, sometimes it's a new news desk. Obviously, it varies. But if they have a slot to fill, I mean, it's a great way to get some last minute media coverage day of. It's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily going to drive people to the event. I mean, it could, depending on, what time it airs, but the most of the time they're probably going to do something at your event, which is great. It's a great piece of media for your media room on your website. And it's just, it's just great, great bragging rights. But definitely you want to get there early. Now, one of the things that I recommend is, and maybe this feels really uncomfortable to you as an author, and that's fine, but if you don't mind shaking hands with people and handing out your information, get to the bookstore even, 90 minutes before your event and start greet people coming into the bookstore, hand them a bookmark or whatever it is that you have your event information on, and let them know that you're doing an event that day. The majority of people going into a bookstore are going to be browsing for a while. So there's a good chance that even if your event is 90 minutes away, that they're still going to be around. So I really recommend it. I've done this. I mean, not just in the Oregon example that I told you where we had like the apocalyptic weather, but I really recommend this. Just, hand out a bookmark and just say, hey, thank you so much. I'm going to be doing a book signing here today at X time and whatever. Ask the bookstore if they will do announcements. The majority of bookstores have some kind of PA system where they can do announcements like, oh, we have an event starting, blah, blah. It's always pull in as much help from the bookstore as you possibly can. So that's my suggestion. Arrive early, be prepared to promote your event even the day of, and uh, email, don't fax, email newsrooms the day of in case you get a cancellation. Amy, do you want to touch on the rest of these?
Yeah. I mean, and again, like Penny said, getting there early because so many places, depending on the venue,
Yeah,
get regular foot traffic all day long. So while it may be weird to camp out all day, but again, coffee shops, other venues where they literally have a constant flow of people. I love that idea, Penny, of getting there early because they're just getting their afternoon coffee. They had no idea an event was going on.
for
And
sure. Yeah.
so it's like getting there early and saying, hey, like you said, there's going to be an event later. It's going to be super fun. This is what we're doing. This is what you can expect. Hang out or plan to swing on by if you're in the area. I think that's brilliant. Because even if they can't make it, you never know. They might text a friend who they know is a huge genre fan and go, hey, I just went and grabbed my coffee and an author's going to be there in a couple hours. If you have time, you might want to check it out.
Yeah, exactly.
So that word of mouth is definitely huge. And then post event, now I feel like I sound like I'm channeling my mother, which, is great. Make sure you do your thank yous,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You want to thank the venue, thank the manager, thank the staff. I mean, share social media posts and photos afterwards. That's another thing that we didn't talk about. I feel like it's very natural nowadays, but it's worth mentioning. Make sure you take the time to take some photos at the event or ask if there's a staff member that can take photos for you. Encourage people that are at the event to take photos, tag you, all the things. Because after the fact, you want to milk this for all it's worth. And if you don't have any photos and no evidence that the event existed, you're kind of screwed.
Right.
So make sure you document what's going on. And of course, ask people, like, may I take your photo so I can post it on my social? And they'll probably go, yes. And, so do the things. Make sure I feel like we're prepping a bride for their wedding.
I know. But can I just let me just interject and then I finish this. Thank you notes, people.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot tell you thank you notes, handwritten thank you notes. Again, I know that I sound like I'm from the 1950s. I'm telling you right now, don't just shoot off an email thank you, send them a thank you note.
Yes.
And that's all I have to say, but I just want to kind of emphasize that. So go for it. Sorry.
No, absolutely. And then, we talked about collecting emails, collecting names.
Yes.
If you get those, follow up with the people that did share their information with you. We all know what a big deal that is to share your contact information in this day and age with how much
Yes.
spam and other BS that we get inundated with. So don't take that lightly. If somebody bothered to give you their email, that's pretty incredible. So personalize thank yous to your attendees, and it would be a high quality problem to have if it's going to take you a lot of time to send everybody a personal email thanking them.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then, yeah, again, I mean, we've given tips the whole time about why one event where even, like Penny said, maybe only 10 people show up, but how that can snowball into so many other opportunities if you do all the right things for the prep, for the post, the networking you'll be doing with the venue, the staff. Like there's so many ways you can build from one seemingly small event that, maybe you thought like, well, I had bigger hopes than this, but build off of it. It's so important to not let that one event be the end of it,
Yes. Yes, exactly. I completely agree with that. And I think that your point, I'm really, we didn't even include it in the notes. It was brilliant that you said it. But your point about make sure that you have evidence, that was great. I mean, you really, not only do you want to have evidence for your socials and just that you were there and to add to your media room, but this evidence is going to be something, the photos is going to be something really good to book other events, right? So if you're like, again, add those to the media room, and then take some video. So set up a camera and have somebody take video if you're going to do a talk or whatever. And then you don't have to post that entire video online anywhere. I mean, you can obviously, but you can also break it up into snippets, right? You can break it up into really fun snippets that you can
Mm-hmm.
use for books, Instagram or TikTok or,
Yes.
Facebook or whatever. Use this event not just to do all the things that we talked about, also to kind of make sure that you're maximizing on the opportunity to, build your repertoire of, other events and things like that. And if you get a letter, make sure that you show the crowd because other bookstores are going to care about that. Like if you have a big crowd,
Yeah.
show a picture of the crowd and things like that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really great. And I've had some authors that say that they get thank you notes back from bookstores saying,
Uh-huh.
"Oh my gosh, event was so great." Save that, add it to your resume to get other events.
Absolutely. I was going to say, if you have a friend with a real camera, I feel like that's like such a novelty nowadays that is actually
Yes. Yes.
like an amateur photographer, even at minimum, recruit them for the event because that's also a big thing too, because then those photos can definitely be used by the venue as well, when you
Yeah.
have higher level and would be great for your website. Not that your phone camera, it does not suffice, but I'm fortunate enough to have a couple friends locally that are great photographers, just amateur photographers. And I would 100% shamelessly, ask them to come to my event and, pay them in snacks and wine.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think that you will find, you know, bookstore events are great ways to build local love because the other thing though too to consider, and this is where we'll kind of wrap up because I think the show has already gone long, but hopefully you found it extremely helpful. That is always our goal. A lot of times authors say to me, I really want to do local media, right? And I want to get lots of local media, and that's great. But the best way to get local media is if the local station or publication or whatever can tether your interview to an event that you have coming up. Right. So local events are great, not just for all the reasons that we mentioned, but also you really want to not overlook and maximize any local media opportunities that you have to get more. Because again, all of this stuff, when you look at the platforms that we talk about and growing your base, these are all bricks in that platform. So the media that you get can then go in your media room. The video or pictures that you took can be used for your social media. I am all about using, maximizing each piece of content that you create. And bookstores can definitely help you to do that. And you never know, you may end up really liking events. I remember the first bookstore event I did was, of course, talking about the industry, talking about the publishing industry at that time. I had 64 pages of notes, Amy. I was
Oh my God.
terrified. And I remember I had somebody walk up to the podium and ask me, and I was literally just like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I'm sure that I was like the worst presenter ever. And for whatever reason, and that after that, even another bookstore invited me to do a talk. But I had some guy walk up to me just before I started speaking and said, "You're not going to read all of that, are you?" And I was like, I was kind of planning on it.
Yeah, right.
And now if you put me up in front of a crowd, like I'm just like, I mean, PowerPoint's always helpful, but I can just, you know, fly by the seat of my pants, as they say. So if that's your goal, bookstores can be a really, really great way to get your foot in the door and really get to know this in-person market, which we so often forget. So thank you all so much for listening. This show was really fun. This was one of those little nuggets that we're like, oh my gosh, we haven't done this yet. So we're really glad to have done this show for you. And if you we always welcome show feedback. So show ideas, show feedback. If you get an event or you've done an event and there's something that we didn't cover, point it out to us, because maybe we can do a whole show around that too. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.